So the next stage now is to use the marker float as a target. I'm lining up on a dip in the trees on the far bank so that when I take this marker float out later, I can cast in the right direction. But for the time being, I'm going to get this float out there a reasonable distance, round about 60 to 70 yards, as I say. Just check that it's not in any thick goo or anything, which it isn't. And then just check the depth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the depth that I want. And now I can use that float as a target for my rig, and I can use it as a target for my free bait. What I'll probably do, because I'm trying to intercept cruising fish here, is put an arc of bait out around that float and try and stop fish as they come through, and put 2 rods either side of that float in that general vicinity. And then I'll probably use a 3rd rod as a bit of a rover, looking for signs of fish I might see travelling, and maybe cast PVA bags or PVA stringers on that one, but we'll cover those in a minute. So now the float's on the surface, I'm going to lay the rod down, but I'm just going to wind a little bit of line with the tip under the surface, just to sink the line between the float and the rod tip, and then pay it back out until the float appears on the top, and then just lay the rod down with the tip just under the water, so that the line between the float and the rod tip is sunk, and it's not going to form a big belly out in the lake that I'm likely to snag up with when I cast my rigs at it. Now the next stage is to try and mark off that distance on the rods that I'm going to be fishing with to the float, because I'm not going to leave that float out there. Once I've got some bait out there and I've got my rigs in position, I'm going to take the float away so that it doesn't tangle up with any of the other lines if I get a fish. But of course I want to be able to return to that spot. Now I know which direction to cast in, because there's a little V, a dip in the trees on the far bank that I can aim for, and that's a good spot because I could even see that at night if I wanted to. But that doesn't take care of the distance. So what I need to do now is to mark my lines so that if I need to get back to the same spot, if I catch a fish, I can always return to that distance. Now, to do this, it's a good idea to do it without a hook link. Okay, so I've got my basic rig, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail later, so don't worry. But basically, there's no hook link on here to get all tangled and knotted up. All I'm after at this stage is to mark the line. So I'm going to now start to cast towards the float until I get the right distance. That one was a bit short. So I'll have another go at that. I'm looking to cast within a few feet of the float at about that distance, because that's where I'm going to be baiting up. So let's just make another cast. Okay, I'm almost there. I'm probably about 7 or 8 feet short. So what I'm going to do is just let a little bit of line off, and now I'm going to use the line clip on my reel to make another cast. So clips here, I'm going to take the line like this and just pop the line into the clip there. Now that's going to control the distance. I'm going to make another cast now, a fairly hard cast, and hopefully the clip will control that distance and drop the lead in quite close to the float, so I know that I've got the range absolutely right. So let's just make that 3rd cast now. With any luck, this should land quite close. The clip will kick in about now, and as you can see, I'm literally within about 18 inches of the float. If anything, I'm slightly too long, and if I wanted to be really pedantic, I'd unclip, take up just a few turns of line, and then clip again. And I know that if I make a reasonably forceful cast with the line in the clip, I'm going to drop onto that spot every single time. I'm going to aim for the V in the trees on the far bank, make a reasonable cast, not too hard, I don't want the line pulling hard against the clip, but if I've got the distance reasonably right, a good distance cast, it's just going to drop in every time. Now, You might be wondering, am I going to leave the line in the line clip? Because what happens if I get a run and the carp zips off with it? Isn't it going to break the line or pull the rod out of the rest because the line can't run freely? Well, the answer is yes, it would if I left it in the clip. So what I'm going to do now is, before I wind in, I'm going to pay some of the rod back along the bank, and I'm going to take some marker braid. This is really good stuff. It's basically fly line backing. It's a hollow sort of braid, and it's very bright in colour, so you can see it at night. You need about a foot of braid. Just snip it off there, and then I'm going to tie a sliding stop knot. Take a loop of line laid parallel to the main line, and basically we're just going to cross the two ends over like that, so that we've got our balloon with two ribbons. Then we're going to take one of those ribbons and we're going to pass it through the balloon, through the loop. Here's the balloon here, and over the main line 3 or 4 times. Now, unless you're used to this, it is quite tricky, but once you've done it a few times, it becomes second nature. Once I've gone through 3 or 4 times, I can then take both ends of the ribbon, put some saliva on the knot, and then just draw both ribbons tight. And there's my sliding stop knot. Now, you can leave the ends here fairly long. I like to trim them off to about that length. They'll pass through the rod rings better that way, and you'll be able to see them better. So you don't need to trim them off really tight. But in doing that, I've done something actually quite important, because let's just say I cast out and unclip my line, but I want to get back to the same spot. I catch a fish. What do? Right, well, basically I wind up a big cast, and I literally cast in the middle of nowhere, fairly long, and then I wind the line back until it appears in the rod tip ring, and then I clip the line again. Cast again towards the bait, and then unclip.